talking a lot about gratitude projects, right? And we have come up with something a little bit different as well. So we got something called the Good People Project, which is something we recently came up with. And we'd like to share a little bit about what that is for you guys. So the Good People Project is a Degaje storytelling series. And this is different from the gratitude projects in the sense where we actually get to talk to local people in our very own community about the good things they're already doing. And it's the things that, people probably wouldn't have heard about. They're not usually the kinds of stories that would make, headlines or media in the normal sense of how we see media. And that's kind of where we want to step in and fill that gap and be like, hey, this person's got a really cool story. They got, a lot of instances of character, consistent character, of humility, integrity, joyfulness. And we just really want to capture that and promote what is good, true, and beautiful. And this person is doing just that. And so we're looking for people in the community to lift up and to preserve their stories.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about why this matters and why Degaje would be focusing on these kinds of stories and producing these kinds of stories for our community. And, we want to pass on what is true, beautiful, and good. And passing on not just good stories for the sake of entertainment, but passing on values. And because really, this is all about cultural heritage. And whether we recognize it or not, Abby, we're always modeling, we're always, being an example of what we believe in, what we value, what matters most. And we want to make sure that what gets remembered is what we actually care about, what matters most to us. And there's a lot of noise in the world, there's a lot of negativity in the world, and there's just a ton of people out there that are quietly making an amazing impact in the community around them. And those are the stories that we think are worth telling.
Yeah, right on. And I mean, we hear a lot of good stories, occasionally like in the news or, instances of history. But what's really unique about this project is this isn't some far off place where this person is doing some amazing thing. It's literally right in your hometown. You just probably wouldn't have heard about it because honestly, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of different videos to watch. If you're on Instagram or TikTok, you can just scroll, it's doom scrolling literally. And so we're really wanting to make a place where what you're watching is worth it. And I think that's something that we're just excited to share with you guys.
Yeah, and when I think about good people that I've encountered in my life, I mean, there is just a host of individuals that pop up into my mind. And one of them would be my grandfather, who passed away several years ago, but literally everybody in the community who knew my grandfather knew his smile, his laugh, his joy, and he was always willing to give a helping hand and sacrifice and lay down what he was doing in order to help somebody else. And this wasn't just a one-time event with my grandfather. He was literally known for this, and it was consistent throughout his entire life. There's another person I can think of, a very dear friend of mine, just so radiating with joy and goodness and encouragement. She was so funny. Didn't matter what was going on in her life, but she always had an encouraging word. She always looked at the worst case scenario with brightness and hope, and things like that matter and are worth passing on. And I imagine that other people, as we're talking about some of these examples, people are coming to your mind as well. So do you have anyone that's popping into your mind, or an example that you can think of for a good person, good people project?
Yeah, I think we're working on a list at the moment, but we were talking yesterday about great grandma Bobby, and we just did a little story on her for her 100th birthday. You guys were saying how like when you guys were young at her house, these random people, not random, her friends, neighborhood, would be walking by her window, and everyone knew Bobby sits at her kitchen window, and that window would be opening, and she'd be yelling across, "Hey, Richard," or whoever it is that's walking by, and just you could not get past Bobby without her yelling out to the neighborhood, and it was just a thing. And I think that's just such an interesting story for me as a younger person to hear about, because neighborhoods just look very different. We recently bought a house in Brandon and we love our community. I grew up here, literally grew up on the same street that I'm living on now with my husband. But it's just a different world. You come home and that garage door closes and that's really all you ever see of your neighbors. And so I think it's really important to emphasize being a good neighbor. And that's one of the reasons we chose the house as our mascot. We just really want to embrace those neighbor-like qualities and really get people connected again.
Yeah, I think being a good neighbor and thinking about being a good person, as we are telling these kinds of stories and these are the things that we are watching, it does impact us in ways that we don't really understand, because everything that we see and hear and all the things that we take in, they really do influence how we end up living our life. And that's another reason why it's really important for us to make sure the kind of media, the kind of cinematic movies and films that we're making are impacting our community in really positive ways. And so let's talk about, though, the difference between a gratitude project, which you mentioned, and a good person project, the good people project. What is the difference?
Yeah, so they both have similar values. They're both lifting up the good, the true, and the beautiful, and passing on what truly matters. But the big difference, I would say, is with the gratitude projects, those are stories that the family or business, whoever it is that's sponsoring that story, has a choice whether or not to share. That could be something that's intimate for the family, a keepsake for them, or it could be something that they choose to public, but really that choice lies with them, and they hire us out for that purpose. Whereas with a good people project, that's very different. The point is to be public. We want to share those stories that really are worth sharing. And the way we do that is through people actually like yourselves, nominating fellow friends, fellow family members to tell their good stories. And I think that's just a really neat way that we can pursue that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So let's think about why a project like this, why it's important. There's all kinds of things that we can watch online. There's people making good stories. There's clean family entertainment. But why does this matter in telling real people's stories of everyday people doing life in a really good way? Why does this matter?
Yeah, I think it really boils down to that this is not just some random far off thing, like I said earlier, but this is truly a living record of local legacy. These are people that are probably your neighbors and you just don't know, who have these really amazing things and things about them that you just wouldn't averagely see throughout your day. And so I think that's why we want to do this, is to really highlight what is good around us. And hopefully that breeds more community. It fosters more growth and relationships. And I know I was talking to a friend earlier, and it's interesting because, she has young kids and she's in a neighborhood with other young families. And what do young families do but go sit outside and watch their young kids playing, right? And their kids mingle, therefore they mingle. And that's a great way to be active in your neighborhood, whereas it's a little bit harder for, say, someone like myself. I don't have kids. And so to just be outside and sitting on my chair looking at the neighborhood is a little bit weird. So finding those ways to really foster that community when it's not there, it's not as easy anymore, is very difficult. And so my hope with the Good People Project is that this inspires people to kind of get back to the way things used to be. To take that initial step. Maybe you are the first one to knock on that door and be like, hey, we just moved here. Here's some brownies, And if you ever want more, if you need to borrow some sugar or some eggs, I'm your gal. And I just really want to bring that kind of community back to Brandon, back to Sioux Falls.
Hearing you talk about what things are like today and what they used to be like reminds me of when we came back from Haiti and you were looking across the street, because life in Haiti was very different. We lived among our neighbors, but we didn't just live, we did life with our neighbors. We did everyday chores with our neighbors. Therefore, we got to know them really well. And when we came back to Brandon and you looked across the street and you saw our neighbor outside doing some yard work, you ran back in the house and you made some fresh squeezed lemonade and ran over to her house like it's completely normal, and which this ought to be normal, but it just isn't in our culture today. And you just sat on her step with a glass of lemonade and chit-chatted as a 12-year-old girl with a woman who is in her 60s, just talking about the day and giving her a refreshing glass of lemonade. And it's like, this is the kind of thing, getting back to like, these are the traits that are worth passing on and building on to make our communities really solid, because when life is hard, and so when you get to know your neighbors in a way like that, yeah, you can do life together in a more meaningful, impactful way. And I think that's really important.
So we recently launched this Good People project, right? And so we have a new page on our website. If you haven't checked that out, please do. And if you continue to scroll, you'll find a nomination form. And that is for you guys to really think about the people that you know who have these stories, and to nominate them. We'd love to hear the stories of your close friends, your family members, these people who are just awesome people who have these great things to tell. We would love to just come in and make that known, really inspire the local people of Sioux Falls and Brandon, the surrounding areas, to listen, listen for these good stories and to continue reproducing things of that nature.
We are so excited to read these stories, and I know we're going to be encouraged about the people in our local community. And this is what we get to make short films about. I mean, how exciting is that to be able to not only recognize a particular person, but it's actually not about that recognition. It is about seeing what characteristics that person embodies that is so worth remembering and passing on to the next generation. That they are modeling integrity and honesty and hard work, generosity, encouragement, gratitude, embodying those types of traits that really do make our communities just fantastic.
And honestly, I think we have the best job ever. I mean, how fun is it to read all of these amazing stories about good people doing good things, and we get to come in and film that and then tell all of you guys about what we just heard? I mean, I think that's just a really cool model, and I think it's the best job ever.
Yeah, and okay, so not only do we get to share stories of great people in our community, but businesses and individuals get to be a part of this as well. So these are business and individuals that sponsor the Good People Project. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how that all works?
Yeah, so this is another key difference of the Good People Project versus the Gratitude Project, where this does require sponsorship. And so, like you said, it can be both a business or an individual who just really wants to align themselves with the kind of stories that we are producing. Again, these are stories that are preserving attributes of integrity, humility, honesty, joyfulness, and just really promoting what is good in our local community. And so if that sounds like something you want to participate in, we have a way for you to do that. We have different sponsorship tiers on our website, and you can read about that, on there. And then if you want to hear more, you can fill out that form and we'll send you more information.
I'm actually really excited about the business sponsorship because, we've been a small business owner. My dad was a small business owner, my grandparents. And so we kind of come from this line of having a small business that really depends on the community for support. And now this is just a really fun and unique way in order to not just help produce some of the Good People Project, these short films, but also this is marketing with a mission. And because these businesses will also be recognized in being a producer and a sponsor of these kinds of stories, and it'll just kind of point back to these business like this is what we value as well. This is worth passing on. And so it's less about marketing a brand or a service or a product, but they're basically showing what they stand for and giving credibility to the kind of business that they are. And so that's also really important because in a day when there's so many businesses out there, but we really want to support small business and mid-sized businesses because they really are the heartbeat of our communities. And so these businesses can help us produce these short films and be a part of the Good People Project in a very significant way.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that, as we get going, as we have more episodes to this project, it really will be representative of how the Brandon Sioux Falls community is, the things that we value, and how neat is it? I mean, just think of other cities like Chicago, just a random one. Like imagine like if you could have a pulse on like what the people of Chicago think and how they act and things they do. It's like that those people represent Chicago and New York and all these different places, but this is Brandon, this is Sioux Falls. And so I kind of envision this also being an interesting thing for tourists. Not that we have too many tourists in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but just other people, visitors who don't really know anything about us, can then maybe even follow the Good People Project and really get an idea of the kinds of people that represent, this community.
Exactly. I think we can completely put South Dakota on the map and be known for the Good People Project.
Yeah.
So sponsored by our local businesses and lifting up great people in our area.
So it begs the question, what if we don't do this, What if we just don't do the Good People Project? Well, I think things would continue much as they already are going. You know, people have their cell phones, they stay reclused in their homes, and you just don't really see your neighbors anymore. And, you know, I was talking about how what it's like for me to grow up in this new generation of Americans and versus the kind of America you grew up with. And it's kind of going downhill. People are getting less and less relational, which is so weird because how it's becoming hard to be a normal human in the sense of, you know, having normal relationships and just being a friend to those who really need a friend. And so it's important to pass on these stories, mainly also as a reminder to ourselves to, hey, get out of your house, you know, go talk to your neighbor who's walking their dog or with the stroller, you know. You never know what those people are going through. And for you to just step in and just honestly be a good person is really important. And I think those values are slowly getting lost. You know, we're slowly becoming more introverted as a society. We don't really like talking to people that we don't know, and it's really easy to make excuses for why we don't do that. And so the Good People Project is rejecting that mentality completely. You know, we really want to talk to those people and we want to change the tide because who wants to just continue being introverts in their houses and never knowing anyone and never having friends to rely on when you need friends to rely on, right? And we're kind of all slowly dipping into that where people just don't have those kinds of friendships anymore like they used to. And I'm just excited to see the ripple effects of the Good People Project as people, you know, start listening, we get a following. What's going to change? You know, how is this community going to change as we promote these stories of good, true, and beautiful things? You know, how is that going to inspire others? So,
Yeah, and ironically, once you start kind of dipping your toe in, you know, putting yourself out there to, you know, help somebody out or sacrifice something where you're just, you know, I'm gonna set down my own schedule and go help somebody move. And, you know, because it takes a lot of effort to go help somebody move. And you do that one time. And again, we're not looking for, you know, just one time events. It's contagious. Once you kind of get that feel of, yeah, it felt great to encourage somebody. It felt great to help somebody else out. And now I'm building a relationship with somebody new. And we really do think it's going to have a ripple effect that is that people probably don't really comprehend at this point, but we're really excited to see what happens with all of it.
so I'll quickly give a short story here. Like I said, my husband and I recently purchased a home and the paint had not been repainted in like, I don't know, 60, 80 years. It was intense. It was really bad. And so we were like frantically painting our house. A storm was on its way. We were supposed to go meet up with friends for a Bible study and we had to tell them, I'm sorry guys, we can't make it. The storm is coming. We have to paint our house. And I felt so bad saying that because they were counting on us to do this thing. And our community was just like, no, it's okay. We'll come to you. We'll come and help you paint your house. And I know this is a big thing you're working on. And literally, people just came. They brought their own paintbrushes. And I think I still have some of their paint pans. And just like, they came and they showed up and they were the community for us. And it was just really cool to see how they came together to help us accomplish a common goal. Well, it was my goal, it wasn't their goal. And I think that's just the kind of neighborliness and the good stories that we really want to hear from you guys. We are so excited about the Good People Project. So please join us on this journey because together we make a way. See you next time.
Journeyman, making a way, just a journeyman.